Have you ever gone down to the basement or up to the attic and noticed old boxes that have been in storage for what seems like centuries? Is this junk, or are you hiding away a fortune without even knowing? Dust off those boxes, open them up, look inside, and be taken away to days gone by, leading to an in-home nostalgia-fueled exploration. Who knows? You may have a Derek Jeter rookie card. Your father may have packed away a prestigious Marvel comic. Or your sister may still have her dolls that have been kept pretty after all these years. Or you may find that your mother has a large vinyl collection. Regardless if you have the urge to collect or make money, you have entered a new universe, a parallel world of collecting and hoarding. A world with the passion and ambition to gather valuables that may possibly lead to a wealth for you. This is the world of the collector. Collecting beyond the conventions. Do any of these sound familiar?
It's me, Mario!
Pikachu!
If so, I'm sure they hit a childhood nostalgia button, harkening back to a simpler time where one didn't worry about classes, bills, deadlines, or finding a job. We found that most of the time it's nostalgia that drives collecting, and all of this usually culminates in some giant convention in a major metropolitan area in an enormous building with acres of fluorescent lights and vendors selling everything you've ever wanted. But where would one go when the conventions aren't in town? Well, Lou and I got our gear and headed down to Mays Landing to speak with the owners of Farpoint Toys and Collectibles, a store bursting at the seams with toys, comic books, vinyl, video games, movies, statues, and much more. The store recently moved locations to Route 40 in Mays Landing, a 5-minute drive from the Hamilton Mall and Walmart, a perfect high-traffic area for shoppers and people on their way to the Jersey Shore. We sat down with owners Justin and Penelope to discuss what got them into collecting and eventually opening up their store.
Let's take it back to the 70s and the 80s. No. As kids, we all played with toys. His big thing was G.I. Joe's. My big thing was like My Little Pony. As a kid, you have those things, and then you grow out of it.
Early 2000s, I started looking at toys, specifically like McFarlane toys, Spawn, and those lines that were coming out. And they were unlike toys that we had when we were kids. The detail and the sculpting and everything was really cool. So I bought a couple because they looked cool. I wanted to put them on a shelf. They were kind of like statuesque, but they were toys.
Yeah, and the kinds of stores that sold those kind of things, were FYE, GameStop, and we're nerds, so we would go around shopping and looking at stuff like that. And then we came across, I think, a toy show.
So a friend of mine, I worked at Guitar Center at the time, and a friend of mine, it was like a dirty little secret. We somehow got on the topic of G.I. Joe. I'm like, man, I really love G.I. Joe. And he's like, yeah, me too. And we're just like looking around like, oh, do we admit to ourselves? And finally he says, well, I collect G.I. Joes. And he brought in this book. This is my best friend now. And it's every G.I. Joe thing that ever came out. And I looked at the book, and it was my childhood.
Do we have a copy?
I didn't know the book even existed. So the book was my childhood. It was written by a guy named Mark Alomo. It's the ultimate guide to G.I. Joe. And I'm looking at him like, I had that. And it just lit this fire inside me. And right at that time, it was G.I. Joe 25th anniversary, and new G.I. Joe toys started hitting the shelves. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go buy a few of these. And it was like, I assume, because I really don't know, but I assume it was like heroin. I bought one or two, and it was over. I just started buying everything I saw.
And his friend said, hey, there's this show in Delaware at a Nurse Shrine Temple building, like a VFW style
Moose Lodge
place.
kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's where all these people that sell toys and collectibles get together and just sell and trade and all this. So we went with him. And at that show, I met a gentleman who was selling My Little Ponies, vintage ones. Now, I had my original collection from when I was a kid, 10 or 12. And he had a whole bunch. And I was like, oh, well, that one's cute. I'll just go ahead and buy the one.
Like a pirate seeking treasure, beginning the journey of collecting could be like digging for gold. G.I. Joe and My Little Pony became Justin and Penelope's treasure from their golden past. And just like hunting for treasure, the couple would begin a mission collecting anything and everything that fits this desire. To comic book, movie, and video game stores to feed this hunger at first, but discovering conventions leveled up their collecting craving.
If you have the collector's gene in you, collecting is like eating Doritos. Once you get one, you are not going. Who's going to eat one Dorito? So who's going to buy one pony or one G.I. Joe? You know what I mean? If you have that collector's gene, and it kind of is a gene, like you need it. It's like being obsessive, kind of. So that kind of started. So we were like, at that point we were addicts. She was buying ponies, I was buying G.I. Joe.
I also, I branched out a little bit. I tend to collect collections, so I also have a lunchbox collection, and a little bit of He-Man here and there. But we would go to these shows, and, whatever looked cool, we would pick up. And it got to the point sometimes where, here's a giant tub of My Little Ponies, and there's only 4 of them that I really want for my collection, but there's 20 in the tub. I'll just buy the whole tub because that's the deal. And then I end up with these extras. So you trade them with people, throw them up on eBay.
Meanwhile,
and a little at a time.
Meanwhile, a toy store opens locally. We drive by it one day and we look and we're like, what is that place? It's just this store on the side of the road up in Buna in Richland. And it's big yellow sign says, it's a toy store. And we're like, well, that's a ridiculous name.
Yeah.
And there's like a purple panther outside. And we're like, this is crazy. So we look and it's not open yet, but we're like, man, I can't wait for this place to open. Place finally opens and we go in and it becomes like our Saturday hangout. I sit on the steps and get friendly with the owner, and the owner can never stop talking. And he's telling us about the business, and I'm like, this guy's awesome. He's a hustler. He's making money.
Now, meanwhile,
he's supporting himself by doing what we love. So I'm soaking it all in.
And meanwhile, we're both working jobs that we don't necessarily love. I have a retail job, retail management, and I don't hate it, but it's really not, it's paying the bills, but I'm not like, oh, wow, retail management's my life. And Justin, you're still at Guitar Center at this time, I think.
Yeah, well, I left and went and worked for a guy in a record store on the Ocean City Boardwalk. And that's a seasonal thing, the Ocean City Boardwalk. You're only on there for the summer, and then in the wintertime, you kind of close the shop. Well, he said, listen, I'm thinking about going to the mall for the winter. You want to come over and help me set up the mall store, and I know you're into toys. You're always talking about toys and stuff. What, you want to do a little corner in the back and sell some toys, some of your extra toys?
So we said, what the heck,
Sure.
Just a little corner for the season,
So Penelope thought up the great name, Farpoint. We juggled a couple names, but we definitely wanted a Star Trek reference because it's the first thing we ever connected on.
Because we're nerds.
So after learning the things I learned on that guy's step, I'm not saying anybody can go sit on some toy store step and do this. It takes a certain kind of personality. We opened a little thing in the corner out in there in the rock shop in the mall, and it was fun. We made made a couple bucks. None of us were retiring or quitting our day jobs. Then guys on Tilton Road, Level Up Entertainment. We used to go in there and buy toys from them and check it out at the store. And they had a really good store on Tilton Road. One of the owners, I forget if it was Sean or Greg, I think it was Greg,
Yeah.
came into the rock shop and said, hey, we're thinking about coming to the mall. How is the mall? And I said, it's pretty cool. People come here. It's the mall. People come to the mall. You know what I mean? And they were dying on Tilton Road. Nobody could see their little shop off the road. They came in and asked me about that, and I got the idea they were thinking about coming to the mall. So I came home and said to Penelope, hey, those guys from Level Up Entertainment are thinking about coming to the mall.
Now, at that time, their toy selection was very small, and they were actually thinking of phasing it out almost entirely,
Yes.
because in their location, they weren't doing that well with it.
They're comic and video game guys, and that's their passion anyway.
Yeah.
So one day we went in there, we thought about it, and the rock shop was a record store. Well, it didn't really congeal that too much with toys. So when we thought comics, video games, and toys make sense.
makes
So
more
we
sense,
said,
yeah.
hey guys, thinking about going to the mall, we should team up with you. We'll do toys, you guys do the comics and video games. Turns out they said yes, we teamed up, we did toys in the first level up. It was downstairs. We made a window display, won an award for the window display, and the store, we're all very passionate about the store. It was great.
Justin identifies 3 types of collectors: those that hold and keep building, those that trade their pieces for a prize, and those that sell for greater value.
There's a couple different kinds of collectors. There's the nostalgia people who like reliving their childhood, regaining their childhood because they had their toys sometimes your best friends. I was an only child until I was like 8, so my G.I. Joes were my best friends. I sat alone and played with G.I. Joes. So recapturing that childhood is that's the main reason we do this. But there are people who collect, and I can't knock them because some things are valuable, who collect specifically for the value, who are
The monetary.
yeah, who say, okay, well, I'm going to buy this now because it's going to be worth this in the future. Doesn't always pan out.
Beanie Babies.
Right, exactly. 90s comics come to mind. But still, that's why there's a... So to answer your question, there's a couple different reasons people collect. Hoarders, who just can't get rid of anything. Nostalgia, who want to recapture their youth and look at a thing and be like, wow, I remember that. And people who are collecting for some kind of value, for like, I could sell this for more in 10 years. There's people that comic books right now, old comic books, you could buy an Amazing Fantasy 15, first appearance of Spider-Man. Huge comic book. It depends on grade, but you can buy one right now for $5,000. Well, in 2 years, that comic book is probably worth $7,000. Comic books right now are valuing faster than, I don't know,
Comics,
investing in the stock market.
There are some comics that, and we say this about toys sometimes, that are worth more than their weight in gold.
Yes. There are accessories for toys, like guns and weapons and stuff, because that's stuff we lost as kids.
Despite reselling the merchandise in the store, Farpoint cherishes their collecting for a nostalgic value that connects them to their past.
Some of it comes down, and for me personally, it's about nostalgia. The toys we play with as kids remind you of a simpler time, maybe a better time, but they throw you back to when things were simple and I guess happy. And not that things aren't simple and happy now, it just gives you that feeling of, innocence and just kid-like nostalgia. So for me, aside from the fact that I feel like I'm a hoarder sometimes, I like that hunting and collecting kind of vibe. But for me, it comes down just to nostalgia, I guess, really.
Other collectors build for commodity and transforming their valuables into wealth.
This happened to muscle cars, hot rods and stuff from the 60s. In the 90s, people started buying them for value, and a crate made the value of those crazy, so regular people who wanted to collect them couldn't touch them. And that's what's happening with comic books right now. It's what's happening with, there's a thing called grading. Toys get, and that's people who are collecting for value. There's a word for that, I forget. They're speculating.
I have $1,000 I want to invest. Do I go put it in the stock market and hope that I make 12, back? Or do I go buy a comic book that in 5 years is going to be worth twice as much because I went and had it graded and put it away? Maybe not in a museum style, like I don't have it hanging on my wall. Maybe I have it in a safe deposit box. I'm not that kind of collector. There are people that will just get things because they're worth money, like you were saying, and even just put them away and not even look at them. Stuff has to be out or it's not worth having, in my opinion. I want to look at it.
While these shop owners enjoy managing their trade and their shop, they are collectors at heart. Sometimes the value of their toy is more important than the dollar amount. Instead, it becomes an irreplaceable piece of your life, something that cannot be listed with the price. It is something that collectors will hold with sacred value.
My first answer with my My Little Pony collection, my ponies from when I was a little girl, I will never sell them. If for any reason in the future, I tend to do this. I'll collect something for a while and then I'll get out of it. Like Pops. I sold off all my Pops and bought myself an awesome gaming laptop because I decided I wanted to start playing Skyrim. I'm the kind of person that I'll collect something for a while and then I'll flip it over and turn it into something other collection. My vintage original ponies from when I was a kid, they are hammered to death. They are beaten. They went in the bathtub. They went outside. They got buried. The only thing I didn't do was cut their hair or blow them up. That's where I drew the line. But everything else, My Little Ponies have the symbols on the side. They're rubbed off. You can't even see them anymore. They're not, if I were to sell them, I wouldn't get a lot. It doesn't matter. They matter to me, and I would never, for any reason, sell them. The second thing I'd like to add is about 5 or 6 years ago, we went on a really cool road trip for my birthday and ended up in a cool shop out in Ohio, I believe, where Justin found a really cool mail-away My Little Pony. Now, in the 80s and 90s, you guys are probably familiar. Like you said, you have your 5 checkpoints, and you mail them in and give them $5, and they mail you whatever toy. Well, there was a My Little Pony movie, and it was a surprise. You didn't know what toy you would get when you did this mail-away. It was like a big reveal. And the character's name is Hollywood. She's a pony with fancy wings and glittery hair, but you can mail away and get her. And Justin got me still sealed in the bag. And I'm not too anal about my collection. I don't mind if it's loose or complete or not. But she's still sealed in her bag with her little brush, and her hair's perfect, and everything's still in there. So she's between the stuff that was mine and her for the nostalgic factor. Because, again, nostalgia can be new. Justin got it for me for my birthday, so she has special meaning. So those are probably the 2 things that I would never want to get rid of.
I'd want to say the Vinyl Cape Jawa, but that's actually replaceable. We got a Vinyl Cape Jawa right when we opened.
You're considering that part of your personal collection, huh?
Well...
It's in the case over there for sale.
I know. So, and this is something that's my personal. It's not for sale in the store. In 1982, G.I. Joe used to be 12 inches. Used to be this big 12-inch guy. Well, in 1982, they made G.I. Joe Star Wars size. That's when I got into G.I. Joe, 7 years old. Perfect time. Well, I never had this piece. Well, I might have had it, but I don't remember. But a couple years ago, I got a boxed, it's called a Cobra Missile Command, and it's basically entirely cardboard. So we're going to actually do a podcast, or not a podcast, a vidcast like we do, about cardboard pieces. Cardboard is some of the rarest toy stuff there is.
Because it disintegrated.
Yeah.
It's cardboard. Yeah.
So this is just in the box, open box, but never removed from, like, how you pop it out of the squares. It's just beautiful. And it's the Cobra Missile Command Sears exclusive from 1982. I don't think I'd ever find it again in this kind of condition. So I think that's probably my favorite thing I would never get rid of. Just because I could replace the Jawa, but I don't think I could replace that.
Though in the business of trading, investing, and better yet, treasure hunting, collectible gems that amount in the same value of a small family home or a college education are presented to shop like Farpoint.
The best thing that's ever been offered to us, we made it happen, and that was a Hulk #1 comic book.
That walked in the first month we were open here, and we weren't letting it go. We literally, it was the first month we were open. We had just spent all this money on getting everything ready for the store and opening and marketing and all that. And we had to scrape the bottom of the barrel, I'm not going to lie, but we made it happen.
It's actually in stores right now. There's no 401k in this business, and we talked about collecting for value. Some items are 401k.
The retirement box, we would call it.
Certain number put away, so at the end we could just sell that, and we can...
Retire to Belize.
When these rare and expensive items are brought into the shop, it is hard for these collectors to say no. And once Justin and Penelope were introduced to the rarest of original Marvel comics, they could only sell it at one price, their price.
It has, we like to call it the F you pay me price.
Yep.
that's when we don't want to get rid of something.
Stars.
Yeah, right. We were like, you know what? You want to pay that? Fine, take it.
Sometimes the most experienced collectors are stunned when they are introduced to rare treasures.
Well, one thing we saw, but it wasn't offered, we went to a guy's collect. We bought a collection from a guy, a lot of that creature stuff, some statues. He had page 5, original art. Well, he had the original page 5 from Avengers #1.
It wasn't on the table.
It wasn't on the table. God knows what it's even worth.
As the owners of Farpoint Collectibles said previously, the comic book industry and the comic book values fluctuate.
The sales and collections of comic books have had several up and down periods ever since comic books reached mainstream popularity with the introductions of Superman and Batman in 1938 and 1939 respectively. The 1950s relied on the Cold War and the growing interest of science fiction. Meanwhile, the 1980s saw authors like Frank Miller and Alan Moore embrace darker and more adult themes, which led to acclaimed stories such as Moore's Watchmen and Miller's Batman Year One and Batman The Dark Knight Returns. In the last few years, comic books, both in print and digital, have seen financial success, due in no small part to the sheer number of superhero movies. In their latest special edition, Life Goes into the History of Comic Books, and author Nancy Lambert shows how the sales of comic books have increased in the last 6 years. In 2011, the year that Thor and Captain America made their debuts in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, comic book sales in North America were at $690 million in print and $25 million in digital. 1 year later, print sales were at $735 million, while digital sales jumped to $70 million. That could be attributed to DC Comics having a full year under their New 52 reboot, as well as 2 movie juggernauts in Marvel's The Avengers, Christopher Nolan's third and final Batman movie, The Dark Knight Rises, both of which made over $1 billion worldwide. As Justin of Farpoint Toys said,
Media drives the trends. That's really basically it. The hottest video game, the hottest movie, the hottest comic book. Well, that drives the collecting.
and he's not wrong because it's quite easy to see a connection. The Life Special Edition shows that print sales for comic books climbed to $995 million, while digital sales were at $90 million in 2016. In 2016, 6 superhero movies were released, with all 6 grossing over $500 million, and with Captain America Civil War grossing over $1.1 billion. Not to mention direct-to-video releases such as Batman the Killing Joke, and TV superhero shows like The Flash and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Justin's claim of media driving the trends and sales of comic books becomes all the more visible to see.
It's the same thing with comics. Yeah. The new Marvel movies are hot, so, someone loves Spider-Man. They want to know, okay, well, let me figure out what the cool Spider-Man stuff is. Let me go backtrack, until you get to the Amazing Fantasy.
This point also seems to be verified by Penelope's claim that the latest trends in collecting movements begin online.
What people are interested in, it ends up online. So, we can look at eBay, our own trends, what is selling well on eBay. We can translate that into the store. People come in and ask us for things. So that's, another good indication. Things like Marvel movies, Thor is coming out this week. Mm-hmm. So that, we're going to have people coming in that have never even heard, who is Thor? Tell me about Thor. Do you have any Thor comics? Do you have any Thor toys? What's popular in culture and media now is, if you want to know what next year's hot movie is going to be, read comics, because the next hot thing is going to be coming from there.
So in the case of someone like Thor, Iron Man, and perhaps soon with Black Panther, internet trends and the media have not only introduced new generations to these heroes, but the internet and the media have seemed to have played a role in the recent rise in sales of print and digital comic books. As a result, the media has led to these new and old fans alike to begin or resume buying and collecting memorabilia of a certain hero like Thor, or a specific group like the Avengers, or a certain brand like Marvel. When it comes to collecting, there are certain properties, let's say, that dominate the market and have established a long-lasting impact. But what property can lay claim to that title? Well, Justin has an answer for that.
The biggest property ever, Star Wars.
Yes, Star Wars, the franchise about lightsabers, battles in space, aliens, robots, and scruffy-looking nerf herders is not only the biggest property ever, but it is the king of merchandising. And we have George Lucas to thank for that.
George Lucas was a genius when it came to merchandising. He redefined the toy industry. And if it wasn't for George Lucas and Star Wars, I don't think that there would be collectors as they are now. There wouldn't be merchandise like there is now.
And it's true. One of Lucas's conditions in his original deal with 20th Century Fox was that the rights and profits to all the merchandise. At the time, movie merchandise wasn't the cash cow that it is today, so Fox signed off on the deal. As a result, Lucas altered the landscape of collecting as well as the toy world, where the impact was immediate.
The company Kenner that ended up producing Star Wars toys, they were a small company out of Ohio. They weren't a large company. And when George Lucas went to them and they got the licensing, they were so unprepared for the insane amount of people that wanted their product that the first Christmas that Star Wars was out, they had nothing ready. There were no toys. So you would go to the store, mom and dad would go to the store for Christmas and buy you a nice empty thing that said, hey, here you go, kid, you're going to get toys eventually when we make them.
Here's a cardboard stand.
Here's a cardboard stand.
Basically, modern collecting as it is because of Star Wars. Star Wars started the whole pop culture collecting thing. For the most part, if in the extreme way, no doubt about it. And there's never been a bigger property.
And that impact is still being felt. In the new Hollywood Spotlight edition, it's stated that when Disney bought Lucasfilm back in 2012, merchandise sales were over $20 billion. That amount is greater than the James Bond and Harry Potter collection put together. Collecting and Star Wars are so intertwined and so expensive. In 2015, a man in Japan sold his Star Wars collection for over $500,000, while a Jawa figure with a vinyl cape went for sale for over $18,000. Aside from expensive, Star Wars memorabilia is so omnipresent. Costumes, video games, toys, beds, Darth Vader toasters, Yoda cufflinks, and Death Star popcorn machines are just some of the Star Wars merchandise that one can collect. As Penelope said, the Mouse and Star Wars are both forever, and now that the House of Mouse owns the franchise where action takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, the Star Wars merchandise machine will last forever.
So, Star Wars is forever, let's just say. It started the trend. Now that Disney owns it, it's going to be forever. It has its own mythology. I don't think there will ever be a franchise that is as solid as Star Wars.
While store-bought merchandise is obtainable to the casual Star Wars fan, there are some holy grail items that fans only dream of, and that can only be obtained by the seasoned collector. According to the BBC, a vinyl cape Jawa sold at auction for £10,200, which is over $13,000 in U.S. currency. An original movie-worn Chewbacca headpiece worn by Peter Mayhew sold for $172,000 according to The Hollywood Reporter. LiveAuctions.com posted a snowtrooper helmet from The Empire Strikes Back at $60,000, which ended up selling for $225,000. The Journal-Gazette reported that Luke Skywalker's lightsaber from Episode 4 sold at auction for $240,000. And selling for an impressive $625,000 was one of George Lucas's Panavision cameras used on Episode 4. According to The Hollywood Reporter, it is the most expensive piece of Star Wars memorabilia. Farpoint welcomes all through their doors and offer a friendly environment for people to sit down, talk comics and toys, and make a few purchases.
Wherever you are on the internet, we want to be in your face. We really ramped it up on social media. We have an Instagram we post to multiple times a day. We tweet. We've got Facebook. We're always doing stuff on there. I just downloaded Snapchat a couple weeks ago. Tumblr.
We enjoy sharing this stuff. We love what we do.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're excited about it. Maybe in 10 years we won't be. But right now, we still love this. We're still passionate about it.
They have a huge social media presence where they advertise a multitude of events for people to come out and have a good time.
Because we're nerds, and nerds like nothing more than to talk to other nerds about nerd stuff.
Yes.
So we're all about that.
That's why there's a table in our store.
Yes. That's,
Yeah,
one of the main
How many
things.
stores you go in,
Yeah.
Usually it's you go to a counter in the bar, exactly. Usually it's a counter. Hey, did you read this month's issue of X-Men? Yeah, I did. It's really good. Okay, see you later. Next.
But, you know, we wanted a space where people could come, and if you guys decide you want to play Magic or Pokemon, and, you know, your house, you don't feel like going there or here, you guys can meet here and hang out here.
Yeah. We want to cultivate a space where people would want to come hang out.
Yeah.
Anybody selling collections.
If you're not buying, you're dying, and that's no collection is too big or small. We will come to you. You can come to us. Just give us a buzz. Shoot us a Facebook message.
Whether it's collecting for profit or to satisfy a nostalgic urge, it's something that we all seem to do. Farpoint offers a year-round service for those who don't want to go to the conventions or simply cannot. From Justin and Penelope, we've heard their wonderful story, turning their collecting into a career. They've taught us about different types of collectors and the driving force behind them. From the students at Rowan to the owners of Farpoint Toys and Collectibles, we would like to thank you all for listening.